Alright everybody, it's Skwatter here with another review of the games he's played. Okay, so let's jump right into it. I've played two games since I have made my last review. They are the two versions of Ys 4. One is labeled Dawn of Ys on the TurboGrafx CD, and the other is labeled Mask of the Sun on the Super NES or Super Famicom. Should have also said PC Engine CD for the former. Okay, so the reason why I waited to do this review, or this rambling, pretty much, is because I wanted to play both versions of the game to get the full experience before I comment on one. Because had I not done what I'm doing now, I could have made comments on one game or the other, and once I played the next game, those comments that I made before could have been circumvented or superseded or moot, basically. So that's basically why I've been dark for so long. So uh, looking at this here, uh, you know, so Falcom releases two versions of this game, and I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe they thought that there was a different fan base, sort of thing, on each console or something. I really don't know. I mean, they were developed by two different developers. The TurboGrafx version was developed, I believe, by Hudson Soft, and the Super Nintendo version was developed by Tonkin House. Um, and I gotta tell you, people have been saying that the developers had taken certain liberties with each version of the game, more so with the CD version because of the higher capacity and more capabilities and everything. But to be honest, I gotta tell you, playing through both of the games, as you've seen me play them through on my YouTube channel, I gotta tell you, the TurboGrafx version is by far, and I gotta tell you, by far, the superior version in every way, shape, and form, honestly. I mean, the TurboGrafx CD, I'll just call it the TurboGrafx CD. I'm not going to bounce in between the PC Engine CD. I know it's a Japanese game originally, but I did play, as you know, the translation, so and I played it on an American system card image. Of course, I played it on the emulator. I'm not going to deny that. Uh, but yeah, so even though that the TurboGrafx CD is an 8-bit system with 8-bit capabilities, I will still say that the presentation, the quality, the cinematic feel of the game, it is it's just there, like everything is there for you. It's got everything, right? I mean, it just draws you right in with the narrative. I mean, the narrative is way more solid in the TurboGrafx 16 version than it is in the Super Nintendo version. Uh, I mean, the Super Nintendo version just basically starts right up with you on the pier, right, and you're talking to your friend Dogi, consequently named Colin in the first game. Uh, However, with the TurboGrafx CD version, there's voice dialogue, there's cutscenes, there's a meeting with you, Goban, and Dogi, and everything. It like the script just imagine like the Super Nintendo version is an intensely stripped down version of the TurboGrafx CD version. It's as if like the TurboGrafx CD version is a full graphic novel, while the Super Nintendo version is basically, I don't know, like a serial comic you'd find in the pages of Electronic Gaming Monthly or something. I mean, it's really like that, honestly. I mean, to be honest, it's the game that I played first out of the series. Well, not necessarily the series, but between the two, I played the TurboGrafx 16 version first. And a lot of the times when you play the game first, you say, okay, well, that's great, but then there's this one, then you play it next, and then it always sounds better. Not so with this one. I gotta tell you, the first one, the TurboGrafx CD version, is the best. I mean, I love the cutscenes. They're very cinematic. They've got a lot of animation in them. The music is fantastic, whether it's PCM or live recorded. Um, I don't know. I grew up with a Super Nintendo, and I kind of like how the music in the game, in that version of the game, kind of mirrors, sound effects and rhythms and beats that I've heard from other games before. But again, it's just not enough, right? I'm a fan of older consoles. I definitely am. But the thing is, I don't go before the 8-bit era, and I hardly ever play anything from the 8-bit era. I mean, I consider the TurboGrafx and Turbo Duo and that sort of thing a 16-bit system. It may have been an 8-bit system, I know that for certain, but it had a very, very good graphics processor, and because of its CD add-on, it was capable of doing some pretty amazing things. So I would say that it's more advanced than an 8-bit system because, to be honest, like even on the Super Nintendo, I mean, there are uh, games on the Super Nintendo that have a great deal of variation, a lot of stuff to do. They're very cinematic, especially the Final Fantasies and everything like that. But it's just not enough, really. Like in a game like this, it's just not enough to be just constantly and continually just droning through text boxes. Uh, it's just monotonous, right? It's just boring, to be honest. I mean, a lot of the times different characters have different tinted text, like the text is in different colors, which I absolutely appreciate because let me tell you, with older games on consoles like these, RPGs, sometimes it is very difficult to figure out who's talking, especially uh, when the text boxes aren't labeled. They're not possessive of certain characters. However, in the text boxes, the color of the text commonly correlates to the color of the character. Like if they're wearing a red shirt, like if they're wearing majority red clothes, then generally their text is going to be red. Adol's is always yellow for whatever reason, a kind of goldish yellow, even though I think it would be better as, well, red, like his hair and his armor. But, that's just me saying that. So, uh, but yeah, again, it's just hard to get through, it just gets boring really, really fast, honestly, and I just find it hard to get through, uh, and well, of course I had played the game already, right? So I'm essentially playing the game twice. But I mean, to me, on the Super Nintendo version, it just seemed that the plot would just come out of nowhere. It would just advance for the sake of advancing. I mean, on the TurboGrafx version, it would seem more like well, as I said, the narrative was much stronger. Like you would have cutscenes and recorded voiceovers that would tell you what's going to happen next. And I mean, because of that, the characters had more soul. They had more feel. You experienced their plight more honestly than just seeing a bunch of text kind of scroll across a screen. To be honest, and I mean, there were little fun things to do in the TurboGrafx version. Like, I mean, there was that little magician guy in Promorock, I think it was Promolock or something, and uh, I absolutely loved the character portraits when you were talking to them and their mouths moved and everything. I really, really appreciated that. They added a great deal to the storytelling elements. Uh, but I would have appreciated more and varied character portraits, like if they were sad or upset or surprised or really, really happy, sort of like what you would see in I guess Pop Full Mail sort of has a very preliminary kind of it. Um, uh, what is it? Pure Solar, I guess, could really do that well. I mean, it just adds more soul to the characters. Honestly, they're not just pixels and everything. They're not just algorithms, right? I mean, it's just far more entertaining, honestly. I guess that's what I have to say. That's what I have to say about the TurboGrafx version. It is far more entertaining to play. I mean, the character sprites are far more detailed. Everything is more colorful. There are details to the environments that are not present in the Super Nintendo version. Like a lot of the times in the Super Nintendo version, you'd be looking for a blacksmith or an item shop or something, and they'd pretty much just be any nondescript house sprite or construct or anything like that. And other than maybe just a sign that shows like a sword or a shield on it. That's all you would get, right? So, but in the TurboGrafx version, uh, these buildings that were supposed to be certain kinds of buildings, like blacksmiths or like armories or places where the mayor would live, or places where a character who's integral to the plot would live, they would look different from other places, right? They would look different from other houses. Like armories and blacksmiths would have furnaces and chimneys on the outside of them to denote what they were, right? And I mean, it's little details like that, especially in older games like this, that really they get to you, you know. Like they don't get to you as an annoyance, but I mean, it just kind of warms you, you know. Like it says, you know, people took effort in this game, right? And I'm not saying they didn't take effort in the Super Nintendo version, but again, they just didn't have the memory or the capacity to illustrate these locales the way they wanted to, right? So a lot of the time, everything just looks very monotonous, and you know, one town looks exactly like another, and a lot of the times, characters are entirely omitted completely and fully from the Super Nintendo version in comparison to the Super CD version on the TurboGrafx, because I mean, there's no Timmy, you know. I mean, he was annoying as fuck, but I mean, again, it just gives you more things to do in the game, more variations and everything. And I mean, again, the voiceovers, they give the character more soul and everything. They feel more like real people, to be honest. And again, through these cutscenes, the story and the history of the world of Celceta is just it's far more in depth. It's far better told, and just simply giving all of these characters, however infinitesimally worthless they are, uh, it just it adds so much to the gameplay. You know, I mean, one thing I would say about the TurboGrafx version is that this Lord of Slaughter guy, like the main bad guy, or yeah, the main adversary in that version of the game. I mean, he was mentioned a few times throughout it. Like I remember the cutscenes mentioning him and everything, but to me, like he just didn't have enough of a presence in the game. I guess he was sort of like I'm trying to remember who was the bad guy in Magic Knight Rayearth. I can't even remember his name now, but he was like that guy, honestly. He was foreboding, he was imposing, but he did not have a big enough role in the game, he himself, to be a proper antagonist, you know? And that would be one of my only complaints about the TurboGrafx CD version. Uh, and because, you know, well, in the Super Nintendo version, El Deal, this angel guy, he's the main villain, and the game ends with his death, right? I mean, in the TurboGrafx CD version, uh, Garuda, spoiler, well, no, not spoiler, because you already watched the video if you did. Uh, Garuda kills him. Garuda kills El Deal. He stabs him in the back when he's trying to sacrifice Lilia, I think is her name. Uh, Yeah, I'm just looking through my screenshots here. I think that's what happens. Is that no? That's LaFonce's tomb. Uh, but yeah, no. Uh, the TurboGrafx CD version is just it's the better game. Like it is just so much better. It is by far, as I've said, the superior version of the game in every way, shape, and form. You would not need to play the Super Nintendo version if you have played this version of the game. I don't know. It's as if there was a low budget version of Star Wars with half the characters and like half the writing staff. Honestly. Yes, there's the Lord of Slaughter, this long-haired old white dude. Yeah, I don't know. He just wasn't present enough in the storyline to have any lasting dramatic effect on you. You know, I mean, in both editions of the game, I kind of thought that the you know the three dirty dastardly bastards, uh, Garuda, uh, what was the other guy's name? There's a guy and a girl. Garuda, fuck. There she is now. And yeah, well, I guess they didn't make much of an impression on me because I can't remember any of their names. Uh, I'm just looking through my little screenshots that I took while playing to see if I can get these names for you so I don't sound like a complete twat. I can't find anything here. Yeah, no. I thought that the three villains that you fight throughout the game, these sort of secondary villains, I thought that their presence was certainly there. Absolutely, they had the ability to be good secondary villains. But the thing is that I don't know, like whenever you killed them, like their deaths just seemed to be too sudden, right? I mean, I expected each and every one of them to have, a sort of a melancholy soliloquy about how, their sacrifices were in vain and how they failed and they're weak little bitches and everything like that. But no, yeah, I mean, it was the same in both games. I mean, the big guy, big blonde guy who opens his mouth is wide enough to swallow a horse's head. Um, well, he comes back later on, right? So Gaddis, that's his name. Uh, I can't remember the lady's name, unfortunately, though. Bommy, I think that's it. Yeah. So Gaddis, Bommy, and Garuda. Yeah, I mean, their character presence they were there in the game. They had good importance and everything, but their deaths just were not dramatic enough to be satisfying. They weren't fulfilling. So that was a little disappointing. I mean, again, there are always things that you can say, well, I didn't like that about that, but I mean, they made the game the way they did, and I suppose they tried very hard and very well to make it as good as they could. But yeah, the story and the characters, they're just so much more endearing, so much more realistic, honestly, in the TurboGrafx CD version than they are in the Super Nintendo version. And to me, I cannot believe that Falcom chose the far inferior uh, Super Nintendo version as the canonical game. Because I mean, it's just it's so loose, it's so flimsy. I mean, it misses so much out of the game's history. It's not dramatic enough. It's not cinematic enough. It's as if it's any one of your average sort of run-of-the-mill RPG games, honestly. And a lot of the songs that I wanted to hear repeated in the Super Nintendo version just aren't there, like Tower of the Shadow of Death, I think. I wanted to hear that in terms of Super Nintendo sound capabilities, but I didn't, so that was disappointing. And there are very few cutscenes throughout the Super Nintendo version, and they're really simplistic. Of course, I know it's on a cartridge and everything, but the Super Nintendo was well known for having pretty good graphics for its capabilities, for its media and everything. How big the games were, the fact that they were on cartridges, how fast the processor was, and everything. But I mean, yeah, characters are all just shadows of who they were in the TurboGrafx CD version, and it just leaves so much to be desired, honestly. Um, yeah, I don't know. It's just so much more cinematic, so much more dramatic. The TurboGrafx CD version is far superior, and I would definitely recommend it over the Super Nintendo version. Um, so yeah, to be honest, that's. Do I have any ideas of the gameplay? Oh, I really liked how in the TurboGrafx CD version you were able to move diagonally in 8 directions, as opposed to the Super Nintendo version where it was solidly bound to the four-directional plane, right? So no directional movement, and I mean that it really, really, it hindered the gameplay. Absolutely, it did. again, it's an action game. It is an action game. It's sort of an RPG, but it is an action game. You're running around killing guys. It's not turn-based combat like it is in a console RPG. So I mean that feature, especially on the Super Nintendo, a 16-bit advanced system for the time when this game was released, that should have been implemented absolutely. So. Yeah, I got to tell you that was something I did not appreciate not having, is the ability to walk diagonally, because they had mastered that honestly. And uh, Legend of Zelda, they had managed it in I should have said A Link to the Past on the Super Nintendo, so they had really no excuse. They mastered it on Newtopia 2, which came out before this game, Ys 4, so on the TurboGrafx CD. So that's definitely something there. But yeah, no, there are just so many more and different things to do in the TurboGrafx CD version. Like you would be on a raft at some point, or you'd be in a cave, and you'd be in all these different locales and everything that just did not exist in the Super Nintendo version. I know they have dungeons and caves and everything, but it was just the CD version holds water and was just more well put together. It was much more well put together, if that makes any sense. Uh, the cutscenes, like even just for minor characters, I mean, the voice dialogue and everything, even though it's done by small independents. Again, I'm playing the translated version. They put a lot of effort into it, and I really respect them. They did a fantastic job. It is positively phenomenal. I absolutely enjoy it. Uh, yeah, I'm just looking at the scene where Garuda basically plows his sword straight through Eldiel's sternum right there. How do you like that there? Oh no, sorry. It was not Lilia, that is Lisa, isn't it? That Eldiel is going to sacrifice. Yeah. And again, yeah, the relationship between Eldiel and Lisa is just way better told in the CD version than it is in the Super Nintendo version. Uh, I mean, again, yeah, Garuda is far superior, far more superior as a secondary adversary than he is in the Super Nintendo version. In the CD version, I mean, everything is just better. It's just better in the CD version. It absolutely is better. Plus, you don't have to deal with all of those stupid ass graphical glitches that would happen periodically throughout the game. I was thinking, what the hell is that? But I looked at other playthroughs of the game, like at Corn Shack's channel, and I saw the same thing there, so I said, okay, at least it's not my ROM, at least it's not my hardware that I'm playing it on, because I played the Ys 4 Mask of the Sun on my SD to SNES, so that game was actually played on the authentic system. It was a ROM played on SD to SNES, but it was played on my actual Super Nintendo, utilizing, of course, Game Genie cheats because I'm invincible throughout most of the run. Again, I hate it in games when there are instances of uh, purposeful deaths, like where the game is programmed to make you die in a certain battle. Like in, I think there had to be one in Dawn of Ys, honestly. And then later on, when I was playing Mask of the Sun, when I was getting my ass kicked by Bommy, Gaddis, and Garuda, and I was thinking, great, is this going to be one of those instances where it's a programmed death? Yeah. Okay, so we're gonna have to try and save our game as best as we can. We're gonna have to reset, turn the cheats off, play through this, die, advance through that part, save, reset, put the cheats back on, and load. So yeah, that just kind of pisses me off. I mean, there shouldn't be instances like that, honestly. And if you want to have instances like that, I mean, it shouldn't center around your health depleting to zero, right? I mean, it can be in the form of a cinema, right? Uh, so, but yeah, I mean, there's just so much to be desired on the Super Nintendo. The plot just advances out of nowhere. You're being led around by the nose to all these different places, and Dr. Flair, even though he's the one who sets everything in motion, he plays way less of a role in the Super Nintendo. Everybody plays way less of a role in the Super Nintendo version, honestly. And people like Leo, they just don't exist in the Super Nintendo version. I mean, he was a very entertaining character I found while playing this. So yeah, no, I mean, even though the Super Nintendo has more, uh, debatably more advanced hardware than the Turbo Duo. I know the Turbo Duo is a CD-ROM based console, but I mean the Super Nintendo is inherently it has a better graphics chip. It has better sound capabilities. I mean, natively, other than the recorded live CD audio that's on the TurboGrafx CD. But yeah, I mean, I was disappointed with the Super Nintendo version. I was expecting something along the lines of Final Fantasy quality, but given Falcom was such a well uh, developed and a well respected and known developer of this kind of game, of this series. And yeah, so yeah, in parting, I guess I've said most of what I need to say. Just checking through the rest of these screenshots I was taking while playing through it. I mean, the ending is very, very well done on the TurboGrafx CD. I mean, they're on the Super Nintendo version. It's a really, really simplistic cutscene of Lisa just kind of looking all, feeling sorry for herself, kind of thing, saying, "Oh, I'm gonna live my life just like LDL wanted me to," sort of thing. And but on the TurboGrafx CD version, you meet up with all the characters you met throughout the game, and you see all these vibrantly drawn still images of them and everything, and they're fun to look at. Honestly, they look great. Uh, Again, a lot of the characters in this game look similar, which I said I don't really appreciate. Like Karna. Well, I mean the ladies honestly look really similar, but I mean a lot of the men they have better drawing and everything. They look different. It's not just a difference in hair color or anything. They have different facial features and everything, which I absolutely like. So yeah, I mean it's just so much better. You'd have to play it to understand. It's amazing. Yeah, the CD version is incredible. I absolutely love it. So yeah, I love the ending title card, "The Dawn of East," and then you see the Rhoda tree capped with snow, the end, glistening in dusk. Fan fucking tastic, honestly. Way better than the Super Nintendo version. Yeah, so to be absolutely honest, those are my opinions on the game, on the two games there. The CD version has better audio, well, voice acting, better cutscenes and everything. The music is better and everything. Controls are better, as I said. It's just all around the superior game, and to me, it must have been an executive decision compared to sales of which console was doing best at the time. So to consider which one to be the canonical version. So uh, it was definitely a business decision and not one based on any cinematic ground. So yeah, I would say those are my opinions on the games. Go ahead and play both of them if you want, but I highly recommend the CD version. Dawn of East is the game for me. All right, guys, thanks very much for hearing my ramblings. Skwatter out.